off.
Yeah, okay. I have 7 minutes. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, here, look. Just on the cost of insurance, just to say that the Government believes that it is vitally important that consumers and businesses can obtain insurance cover at a reasonable and a fair price. And the average cost of motor insurance has been consistently falling since the middle of 2016, with the most recent CSO data for November 2018 indicating that private motor insurance premiums have decreased by almost 23% since peaking 2 years previously in July 2016, and private motor insurance premiums have decreased to 7.6% in the last 12 months. Of course, this follows the establishment of the Cost of Insurance Working Group, and the group published a report on the cost of motor insurance in January 2017, which contains 33 recommendations and 71 associated actions. Just to say, a key conclusion of the Cost of Insurance Working Group was that there was no single policy or legislative silver bullet to immediately address the problem across the board rapidly in rising insurance premiums. But I do believe that the measures contained in the Personal Injuries Assessment Board Amendment No. 2 Bill, along with the implementation of the recommendations from the report of the Cost of Insurance Working Group and the reports of the Personal Injuries Commission, will contribute to a better functioning personal injuries claims environment and should help to deliver reduced premiums for customers, for consumers and businesses. Just in relation to Section 13, it implements a recommendation from the Controller and Auditor General, who provides independent assurance that public funds and resources are used in accordance with the law, managed to good effect and properly accounted for, and to contribute to improvement in public administration. So I cannot, as Minister for Business Enterprise and Innovation, ignore a recommendation from the Controller and Auditor General, who is a constitutional officer of the state, nominated and appointed by Dáil Éireann. I am confident that the wording of Section 13 of the bill provides that the Minister will have regard to the operational capital and contingency costs of PIAB when determining the sum to be retained, will ensure that PIAB will have sufficient funds to carry out its statutory functions. There are other checks and balances in the system to ensure that PIAB will have sufficient funding to carry out their statutory functions, such as the oversight role of the Oireachtas Business Committee, Enterprise and Innovation, when the Minister is presenting on the Department's estimates during the year, and through the role of the Board of PIAB. Section 13 inserts a new Section 74A into the 2003 Act. The Controller and Auditor General recommended that the Department and PIAB agree an appropriate level of revenue reserves to be retained by PIAB and the basis for holding such a reserve. The Controller and Auditor General also recommended the introduction of appropriate legislation to deal with excess funds held by PIAB. Legal advice obtained by the Department and independently by PIAB is to the effect that legislative change is required to enable the Board to remit excess monies to the Exchequer. The Board of PIAB are anxious that the legislative change is made so that monies can be remitted to the Exchequer as soon as possible. Section 13 provides for a reserves policy for PIAB. It also provides that PIAB shall remit to the Minister, for the benefit of the Exchequer, any monies in excess of those authorised to be retained by the Minister with the consent of the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform. The bill specifically provides that the Minister will have regard to the operational, capital and contingency costs of PIAB when determining the sum to be retained. I wish to assure the Deputy that PIAB will have sufficient funds to carry out its statutory functions. The amount to be retained will be agreed with PIAB, having regard to their operational, capital and contingency costs. We are all aware that PIAB fulfils an important role as it facilitates the objective assessment of damages at a much lower delivery costs and in a far shorter time frame than through litigation. Therefore, it is in all our interest that it is properly resourced. PIAB is self-funding by fees generated from claimants and respondents. PIAB has sanctioned for a full complement of 80 staff. The Board of PIAB, who are directly responsible for leading and directing PIAB's activities, approve the budget for PIAB each year. Detailed annual budgets are prepared, agreed internally by the Executive Management Team of PIAB prior to bringing them to the Board for review, consideration and approval. The Board has a duty to supervise and discharge the discharge of the delegated functions, and in this regard will ensure that there is sufficient funding to do so. The PIAB financial accounts are audited each year by the Controller and Auditor General. When PIAB was established, it was faced with a number of legal cases challenging certain aspects of the legislation and the way in which PIAB operated. It was considered prudent that PIAB retain reserves to meet these challenges, as the cost would be significant. The test cases and the numerous linked cases were subsequently dismissed. In 2011, PIAB refunded its establishment costs of €6.9 million to the Exchequer. PIAB decides on its budget each year, which has been in the region of €10 to €11 million over the past number of years. As mentioned earlier, PIAB is self-funding. PIAB's income budget is derived with the assistance of a forecast model which utilises statistical regression analysis to project volumes. PIAB will continue to decide its budget. The effect of this section is that the Minister for Business, Enterprise and Innovation, with the consent of the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, will agree with PIAB the appropriate level of reserves that PIAB can retain, taking into account its operational, capital and contingency costs. When a reserve policy is in place, it is intended that PIAB will retain an agreed amount of reserves in its bank account that will be over and above the budget it needs for its operational day-to-day activities. PIAB is independent in the exercise of its statutory functions, and the Minister is not permitted in her executive function to interfere in any way with the day-to-day operations and functions of PIAB. Section 74 of the Personal Injuries Assessment Board Act 2003 provides a role for the Minister in relation to the provision of funds to PIAB. For the reasons I have outlined, that this section implements a recommendation of the Controller and Auditor General, who is a constitutional officer of the state, I ask the Deputy to withdraw his opposition to Section 13. Gurmahigut.